You keep wondering why your spirit feels heavy, why your progress gets sabotaged, why your fire dies before it becomes a flame. But the truth is, you're not just fighting your weaknesses, you're surrounded by the wrong people. Jesus never told you to fear the devil as much as he told you to beware of people. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Matthew 7:15. He wasn't only warning about preachers, he was warning about proximity. Some people come close not to lift you, but to feed off you. Your energy, your vulnerability, your momentum. And the most dangerous ones, they don't look like enemies. They look like helpers, encouragers, even friends. But if you look deeper, you'll feel it. That quiet hunger to keep you small. The most dangerous people in your life aren't the loudest. They're the most familiar. The ones who know your old self and want you to stay there, not because they hate you, but because your evolution makes them uncomfortable. Jesus said, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home." Mark 6:4. Why? Because those closest to you often feel most entitled to your limitations. They remember you before you woke up, before you got serious. And instead of rising with you, they resent the version of you they can't control. So they joke, they downplay, they tell you you've changed. And that's the red flag. Growth always exposes the ones who secretly benefited from your stagnation. If your new standards make them distant, that's not loss. That's revelation. The first dangerous person you must avoid is the one who claps when you fall, but stays silent when you rise. They don't attack you, they applaud your self-doubt. They thrive on your confusion. These are not enemies. You'd see those coming. These are watchers, listeners. They gather your dreams just to measure your distance from them. They'll never push you forward because your success reminds them of their paralysis. Jesus called them wolves in sheep's clothing. Not wolves in armor, not wolves in scars, wolves pretending to care. And the trap? They speak just enough truth to stay close. But their presence makes your vision blurry. Their energy dulls your hunger. You don't grow around them, you survive. Quietly, safely, slowly dying. Then there's the flatterer, the person who praises you constantly but never confronts you. They keep you high but not grounded, sweet with their words but silent with their substance. Jesus said, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." Matthew 15:8. The flatterer doesn't want your truth. They want your comfort. They want you easy to be around, undisturbed, unchallenging. And so they feed you compliments like sugar, addictive but hollow. They're dangerous because they stunt your inner compass. You stop seeking what's true and start craving what sounds nice. Be wary of the ones who never correct you. If no one around you is willing to offend you with truth, you're probably surrounded by performers, not protectors. The third person is harder to spot. They're calm, polite. They offer advice that sounds wise but is soaked in fear. They don't scream, "You'll fail." They ask, "Are you sure?" They don't tell you to stop, they just suggest you slow down. But behind every careful word is control. Jesus never warned us about direct confrontation as much as he warned us about the subtle poison of doubt. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. Matthew 5:37. But this person lives in the maybe. They dress hesitation in love and confusion in care. And if you're not paying attention, you'll mistake their fear for wisdom. You'll absorb their limitations as your logic. You'll start shrinking, not because you lack faith, but because you trusted someone who fears your transformation. The fourth is the cynic, the chronic realist. They wear their hopelessness like a badge of intelligence. You speak of dreams, they quote statistics. You talk about faith, they talk about failure rates. And the more you hope, the more irritated they become, because your courage reminds them of everything they gave up on. Jesus said, "With God all things are possible." Matthew 19:26. But the cynic doesn't believe in possibility, only in probability. They don't kill your goals with force. They kill them with logic. They reduce your fire to foolishness. And if you're not careful, you'll start calling it maturity. Don't. It's not maturity. It's fear with a vocabulary. Walk away from the people who suffocate your spirit and call it realism. You weren't made to blend in with resignation. You were made to rise. Then there's the performer. Their danger isn't in what they say, it's in what they pretend to be. They speak in holy language. They move with polished restraint. They always seem in control, disciplined, superior. But look closer. Their fruit doesn't match their image. They pray loud but love shallow. They quote scripture but lack compassion. Jesus didn't spare them. Woe to you, hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs which look beautiful on the outside but on the inside are full of dead men's bones. Matthew 23:27. These are the ones who crave admiration more than transformation. And when you walk with them, you start performing too. You trade authenticity for approval, conviction for reputation. Be careful. Their standard is not holiness, it's appearance. And that appearance will make you forget what real freedom feels like. The sixth is the most seductive. They're the ones who feed your ego while starving your soul. They cheer for your potential, but only if it serves their story. They support you, but only if you don't outgrow them. And they'll never say it out loud, but every step forward you take tightens something in them. Jesus said, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Luke 9:62. Because looking back always leads to compromise, and these people are the reason you keep glancing behind. They're not toxic, they're tethering. They keep you tied to the version of yourself they're comfortable with, and you, out of guilt, nostalgia, or fear, let them. But comfort should never dictate destiny. And your calling is not obligated to make others comfortable. But the most dangerous person might be you. Not the you you're becoming. The one you keep dragging along. The version that still needs approval. That still needs validation. That still believes being liked is the same as being loved. Jesus never asked you to be liked, he asked you to follow. And he made it clear it would cost something. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily. Luke 9:23. Not once. Daily. Because that old version of you doesn't go quietly. It fights. It negotiates. It tells you to pause, to soften, to dilute. But you can't step into your calling with old identities riding shotgun. At some point you have to choose peace or permission. Your environment is shaping your expectations. The voices around you are shaping your values, and the wrong voice in the right moment can sabotage years of growth. That's why Jesus often withdrew, not because he was weak, but because he knew when to protect his space. There are people who don't deserve access to your process. They'll see your healing and call it pride. They'll watch your silence and call it distance. But don't explain. Don't shrink. Don't apologize for boundaries that protect your becoming. Not everyone can walk with you where you're going. Some are not evil, but they are expired. And holding on to expired people will leave you with stale peace. It's not your job to carry who God is asking you to release. It's not cruel to walk away. It's cruel to stay connected to what's slowly killing your clarity. Jesus never hesitated to leave towns that rejected him. He didn't beg to be understood. He didn't plead to be accepted. He spoke truth, shook the dust off his feet, and moved on. Why? Because presence without alignment creates spiritual dissonance. Some people don't drain you because they hate you. They drain you because they no longer belong in your timeline. You've changed. But you keep inviting them into a version of your life that no longer fits them. And every time you let them back in, you reinforce the version of you God already buried. That's not love. That's delay dressed as loyalty. There's a weight that doesn't come from sin, it comes from people, from expectations you never chose, from obligations you never questioned, from conversations that always leave you smaller. That weight is not from God. Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Matthew 11:30. So if what you're carrying is making you bitter, exhausted, fake, it's time to let go. Time to stop managing people's impressions of you. Time to stop explaining your boundaries to those who benefit from crossing them. You're not here to be liked, you're here to become. And sometimes becoming means shedding relationships that were comfortable in your dysfunction, but suffocating in your transformation. Not every connection is covenant. Some people entered your life for a season, but you turned them into a sentence. You kept them longer than the lesson. And now you're wondering why you're stuck. Jesus never confused kindness with access. He ate with sinners, but he didn't build his core around them. He forgave enemies, but didn't invite them to the upper room. Because even love has levels, and you were never meant to carry everyone with you. The higher you climb, the quieter it gets. And that silence isn't loneliness, it's preparation. Don't grieve what God is pruning. Some of the weight you're feeling isn't attack, it's excess. And letting go isn't betrayal, it's obedience. You think they're holding you back, but it's deeper than that. You're using them as an excuse not to rise. As long as they're around, you have someone to blame, someone to appease, someone to consult before you move. But Jesus never said, "Follow me and get everyone's approval first." He just said, "Follow me." Because truth doesn't wait for consensus, purpose doesn't wait for applause, and destiny doesn't wait for permission. If they don't see it now, they won't see it later, and that's okay. Your job is not to convince them. It's to become what God called you to be, even if that means walking alone. Especially if that means walking alone. There are people who need you stuck to feel stable. Every time you level up, it shakes the ground they've built their comfort on. They won't say it, but your freedom threatens their illusion of control. So they joke when you shift. They get quiet when you evolve. They make your healing look like arrogance and your discipline look like pride. But remember, Jesus was hated not because he was wrong, but because he was free. Free from systems, free from manipulation, free from needing validation. And that kind of freedom always exposes chains. Some people don't need to leave. They need to be left. For your sake. For your future. For your fire to breathe. You weren't born to manage expectations. You were born to disrupt patterns. To break what enslaved generations before you. But you can't break what you keep entertaining. You can't rebuke what you still fear losing. Some people in your life were never friends. They were distractions wearing the costume of familiarity. Jesus didn't hesitate to flip tables when what was sacred was being polluted. He didn't wait for approval to act in truth. And neither should you. You've been too quiet for too long. Too tolerant of the weight that doesn't belong to you. It's time to stop negotiating with your past and start aligning with your future. Your circle may shrink, but your clarity will expand. The people who challenge you are not your enemies, but the ones who comfort your dysfunction, those are the real threat. They keep you soft when you should be sharp, distracted when you should be dangerous. They don't want you to be evil, they just want you to be average, to keep scrolling, keep settling, keep performing. But Jesus didn't die so you could blend in. He died so you could wake up. To truth, to purpose, to war. And war doesn't make room for everybody. Some people love the version of you that was predictable, easy, emotional. But this version, the one you're becoming, that one doesn't ask permission to walk in power. Stop calling it loyalty when it's actually fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being called selfish. But Jesus didn't live to please people. He lived to obey the mission, and at times that obedience offended the religious, confused the crowds, and disappointed the familiar. But he moved anyway. And you must too. You keep trying to bring peace into rooms that were built on control. Rooms where your silence was expected, and your boldness punished. But you're not obligated to maintain peace in environments that destroy your identity. Walking away isn't betrayal. It's the beginning of truth. And truth doesn't always feel like unity. Sometimes it feels like freedom breaking everything fake apart. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is walk away. Not with bitterness, not with pride, but with clarity. Because some people are not changing, they're anchoring. They keep you circling the same wounds, the same fears, the same stories. Jesus said, "Let the dead bury their own dead." Matthew 8:22. It sounds harsh, until you realize he was calling you to life, to momentum, to resurrection. And resurrection always begins with burial. Some connections must be buried, not with anger but with honor. You bless them, you release them, and then you run. Because what's ahead requires your full attention, not one hand on the plow and the other stuck in the past. You don't owe everyone access, you don't owe them updates, you don't owe them explanations for becoming someone they no longer understand. Jesus often slipped away from the crowd, not because he was hiding, but because he was focused. Some of you need to disappear for a season, not to isolate, but to incubate, to let God finish what he started in you without the noise of other people's narratives. Because people will label you before they understand you, and their labels are heavy. But your identity is not up for debate, not anymore. God never asked them for permission to call you, so stop asking them for permission to obey. There will come a moment when you realize keeping certain people in your life is costing you the life you're meant to live. And in that moment, you'll be tempted to justify their presence with history. But Jesus never made history the standard for access. He made alignment the standard. That's why he could heal one moment and vanish the next. Because he wasn't attached to staying where transformation was resisted. And neither should you be. You've cried enough. You've explained enough. You've tried to be gentle with patterns that are killing your momentum. But now it's time to get surgical. Because anything that's not feeding your purpose is feeding your delay. And delay is just disobedience in disguise. If you truly want to rise, you need to stop needing approval, needing validation, needing people to get it. Some won't, some never will, and that's not your job. Your job is to obey the truth you've been given. Jesus didn't wait until he was understood to fulfill his mission. He was misunderstood until the end. But he finished anyway. So must you. Stop waiting for consensus to be courageous. Stop hoping they'll cheer while you walk out of the box they built for you. They won't. And that's okay, because freedom isn't loud, it's lonely. But in that loneliness, something holy is born, something real. And that's where the fire starts. There are people you've outgrown that you're still entertaining, not because they add value, but because you feel guilty leaving. But you're not responsible for who they refuse to become, and you can't carry your cross while dragging their comfort. Jesus didn't adjust his mission for those who weren't ready. He spoke the truth, left the invitation, and moved on. Because delay kills destiny, and the more time you spend explaining, the more you forget why you were called. You don't owe them your future just because they knew your past. If they can't handle your alignment, they were never assigned to your next. And it's better to be alone in obedience than surrounded in compromise. You've been warned, not by fear, by clarity. Jesus didn't tell you to avoid people because he wanted you isolated. He told you to avoid the ones who infect your mission, distort your truth, and mute your fire. Some of them smile when you speak. Some of them pray with you. Some of them share your blood. But if they keep you small, silent, or stuck, it's time to move. This is not about judgment, this is about survival. Your destiny cannot afford to be friendly with sabotage. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you'll ever do is walk away from the wrong people, so you can finally walk fully with God.